Hey, my name is Angie Murenga and you're watching Just Angie. And today I want to continue with reviewing just a chapter in this book of Richard Foster talking about money, sex and power and the challenge of a disciplined life. And it's amazing that these three things are the ones that I was going to say not only bring down ministers of God, but really affect society. And anybody who's doing anything great in society, in purpose, has to be very careful about these things. The power that money has, the power that sex has, and that power can really come and corrupt. And you know, I always remember an ad that was done once that talks about power without control. And I'm always reminded that our control, what controls the power that God has given to us, even as human beings, as Christians, as leaders, as authorities, is the Holy Spirit. You know, there has to be the context of a God conscious that stops you from using the power to harm and to hurt others. Anyway, back to my story. I'm still on the chapter of sexuality and spirituality, and I like that it's titled Naked and Not Ashamed. And what this man is saying is that in Genesis 2:25, it says that, and the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. Genesis 2:25. And here he says we have an idyllic picture of two whose sexuality was integrated into their entire lives. And he says there was no shame because there was wholeness. And I love that. There was no shame. They were naked and ashamed, naked and not ashamed because there was wholeness. And he continues to say, I think this is a powerful statement, that there are two situations in which people feel no shame. The first is the state of wholeness. So when you're naked and not ashamed, in right relationship with God, in right relationship with one another, there's a state of wholeness, and therefore there is no shame. But the other is a state of illusion. And that's where he's talking about what the world has become, that the fall created a very erotic world, and in that state of illusion as well, which I guess is where pornography and all that fit in, that they can also, you get to the place where your conscience is so seared that even that state of illusion makes you feel not ashamed, but you should be ashamed. And that's why people watch porn and do things under the cover of darkness, you know, commit adultery, probably fornication, get into things that they don't do them out and in the open. They're ashamed. These things they're shameful and sort of kept away from the eyes of society. And he says that the fall did not create eros, but it also perverted it. So I love that the enemy did not create anything, and God created that eros kind of love, but in the context of marriage and in the context of wholeness, where we are together and we're not ashamed and we can carry that out, that part of life without shame. But every time we pervert it, it now introduces shame. And he says that they know that their masculinity and femininity are a handiwork of God, as is their passionate affection. So we understand that passion, that affection in the context of marriage, in the context with which God created it, is the handiwork of God. It's actually God's doing. And he says the two of them in relationship, in love, and there should be no shame because their sexuality is the creation of God. So what did God create sex for? What did God create sex? In which context? And that's why sexuality and spirituality. I mean, my mind is just really blowing up here when I think about this, you know. But we want to say that, you know, there's a tragedy that has come about by the way that that human beings have righted, I think what the word is, erotic relationships, you know. And we've got to celebrate love and celebrate from a point of view of what did God intend. And that's why I'm always going back to the beginning. What did God say in the beginning? In this book of Genesis, what was his intention? What did he want? Why was man and woman naked and not ashamed? But immediately they sinned and went against God. They realized they were naked. They were ashamed of their nakedness. It's sort of like when God went out of the equation, when God's direction went out of the story, now they were naked, they were ashamed, and then God had to start killing animals to clothe them. But I think this is very, very, very important. I think my greatest takeout from this is that sexuality is the creation of God, and therefore must be carried out in the God context, not in the human context. And we must celebrate that we love one another and that we are created in God's image and likeness, and therefore we also enjoy love in the way that he, the creator, ordained it to be created, to be experienced. So God bless you. There's a lot of stuff in this book that is really really helpful. And again, I said, it's the challenge of the disciplined life. And I know that there are people who say, oh, that's too Christian, or that's too saved, or that's not really what God meant. You know, they want to interpret the Bible and say that God desired another way for us to do things. But no, I think God desired us to be disciplined, and that discipline will affect and show up in all areas of your life. And therefore, I think my challenge is, especially if you're dating in terms of a Christian context, please abstain. Get the discipline of abstaining from sexual sin, because it's not a good thing. It will show up in all areas of your life. You know, the lack of discipline in this sexual, in the choice of not entering into sin sexually, or not entering into sexuality the way that God did not create it, those kind of choices, indisciplined choices, will show up forever. You know, they will show up forever. So it's like we have to, I like that it's a challenge. We have to, you know, accept the challenge and say we can do this. And if God ordained it this way, then it's possible for us to get on and to do it. And I love people who can write books about sexuality and spirituality. So get this book. I think she got it from Bookstop. And let's become disciplined human beings in the areas of money, of sex, and of power. And like I said, I'm not done. I'm going to continue reviewing this book, but I think that chapter on sexuality and spirituality has really touched me, and especially about naked and not ashamed. And I think I'll end by saying, you know, when you're ashamed about something, that should advise you that it is wrong. Why are you ashamed? You should be naked and unashamed, because this is whole, this is pleasing before God, this has got God in it. So what are those things, even if it's not sexuality, that shame you? And if they shame you, that is your default setting within you that tells you something is wrong with this picture. And stop doing things under the cover of darkness. What you can't do in the light, don't do under the cover of darkness. God bless you. My name is Angie Murenga, and you're watching Just Angie.